Speaking about doing something about the country, you've made it clear that you're considering running for president in 2012. Three questions. Why do you believe you're qualified? Do you have the fire in the belly? And how soon would you begin to put this in motion?
I think that, obviously I've not made that decision yet, and to be fair, I'm working diligently to elect more senators and House members in the midterm elections, because I think in the near term that's the best thing that we can do to change the direction of the country.
Which would not in any way, shape, or form be harmful if you decided to run for president next year.
And I'm not ready to debate fully that issue, but I do think that in terms of the presidential landscape and what happens in 2012, I think it will be shaped some degree by what happens in 2010. I think there will be an opening there. I think our side is looking for new Reagan-esque, right-of-center leadership, someone who can, in a hopeful way, inspire people to change the direction of this country. And I think that if somebody were going to get into that field, clearly by sometime early next year, you'd have to do that. And I didn't get into the whole, I didn't answer all your questions, but...
Fire in the belly.
No, you didn't.
Well, fire in the belly, I think, is something that, for me, I see this and always have as in a way, a responsibility, a duty. My father instilled that in me, and public life, I think, is a great calling. And if you think you can make a difference, then you ought to be in the arena. And if I were to decide to do that, I would do it all out.
If the ultimate goal of the Republican Party after November 2nd is to concentrate on President Obama and make him a one-term president, if you will, what type of candidate is the best person to do that? Is it a former governor like Mitt Romney, who has a health care plan that other Republicans will pick apart? Is it a senator like yourself, who has voted for a controversial aspect of bailing out some part of the government? Is it Sarah Palin, who's a bit of a lightning rod? Who's the best type of candidate to put forward on this, and why is it you if you make that decision?
I think that and nobody knows the answer to really who's the best candidate. I think there are strengths and weaknesses for a lot of people in the field. It's all going to come down to some things that you don't control, but getting a candidate out there, I think, who has a right-of-center philosophy that can articulate that in a clear way, that can talk about what's wrong with the direction the country is headed today, and basically have a vision for where we ought to be going that presents contrast with where we're headed today, is a candidate that can win. I mean, I think that President Obama is a very good politician, but the agenda that he has for the country is just wrong. And I think that we have lots of people who might be able to catch fire out there, and all bring different strengths, and we're all going to have votes out there that we have to defend. Strikes me, at least, that we have a number of very strong candidates, and I'm not sure at this point what the field will look like, because a lot of those people haven't announced their intentions.
Speaking of votes to defend TARP, do you think that vote was the right vote at the time? And we have news this week that AIG, one of the biggest recipients, may be able to pay everything back in 2 or 3 years. The taxpayer may actually get slightly more than was extended. In the main, do you defend that vote, and do you believe over time it will be seen, not just by you but by others, as better than it currently looks?
I hope the money gets paid back. I hope the taxpayers get a return on it. We've seen some of that money come back in. I think the current score today is $66 billion is what we expect it to cost taxpayers, and hopefully over time maybe that number goes down as some of that gets paid back. I have probably been one of the fiercest critics and probably biggest advocates of ending TARP since it was enacted, because of how it was used. And most of us who voted for it believed at the time that it was going to be used to take the toxic assets off the balance sheets of banks, to get liquidity back into the marketplace and avoid a freeze in the credit markets. But when they started getting into taking equity positions in a lot of these companies and owning car companies and owning insurance companies, that's just not a good precedent in a free market economy. So it was wrong philosophically. I hope we get our money back. That would be great if we did, but it's how it was used, in my case, in my view, misused, is what I've taken issue with.
Misused by Bush and Obama administrations.
Both administrations, the folks who engineered it under President Bush, made certain pronouncements about how it was going to be used. It wasn't used that way. The Obama administration expanded it and turned it into sort of more of what I would characterize as a political slush fund in terms of the many uses of it. And so it's morphed into something that's very different than what it was when many of us supported it in the first place.
But that original vote, do you regret it?
Well, I wish if you can always ask yourself if I had known then what I know now, would have I voted differently? And obviously, as I said before, I have grave misgivings about how it was used. But I think when somebody comes to you and says the economy is in a meltdown, credit markets are frozen up, these are all the experts, both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. That was a very compelling argument at the time, and there was a lot of fear that if we didn't take steps, it could have been disastrous for the country. And so, in light of an imminent financial meltdown, it was, I felt at the time, the right vote to make. Now,
we have just a couple minutes left.
It might be a
Let me
different
go back to
view.
the presidential bid, because if you were to have a checklist of questions that you would ask yourself, personal questions, political questions, before you decide to run, what would they be?
I think first and foremost, anytime you get in a race like that, is the question that Major asked earlier, and that is, do you have the fire in your belly? Do you really want to do this? Because campaigns, especially in the modern political era, I mean, they are just the rigors of it. It's very, very hard. And then, obviously, if you were successful, the job's going to be very hard. This is not going to be an easy time to govern, because there are hard decisions ahead for whomever the next president is. And so I think you have to ask that fundamental question and come to that conclusion, and then you obviously have to make sure your family's on board. I wouldn't do anything that my family didn't support, because I've seen too many people who get into politics and it ends up sort of wrecking their families because they hadn't bought into that enterprise. And I think then you have to, you got to get into some of the more practical considerations. Can you raise the money? And then those are very real questions that you have to try and answer. And is there support out there? And do you see a pathway with the attributes that you bring to this to get there? So those are all things, I think, questions that you have to ask.